Hey everyone, welcome to a good football show. I am Matt Stroup. It is Thursday, May 26th, and today we will be breaking down some recent offseason news on CeeDee Lamb, Nyheim Hines, and others, and how it does or does not impact their fantasy outlook, plus some late May ADP surprises. A few players with draft positions we were maybe not expecting. I'm joined by Pat Kerrane, Lawrence Jackson, and Kyle Dvorchak. And guys, I think we have to note off the top our colleague Pat Doherty is not here today. This is actually the first Thursday episode of this show he has ever missed. Please don't double check me on that. It's 100%, 100% factually accurate. He is listed as day-to-day due to draft guide obligations. I get the sense he's pretty deep in this thing. So I want to check in with you guys. How is morale and how swamped are you three with draft guide duties? Kyle, let's start with you. How are things?
I think the perfect way to describe how I feel is that when you started off, it was something. Welcome back, guys. Today we will be breaking down. And I thought that was the end of the sentence. I was like, yeah, no, it's about time for me to have kind of just a complete collapse, right? Go to a real all-time low. No, the draft guide's good. We're close to wrapping content, so it's not too bad. But I did think you were saying we were breaking down, mentally.
Yeah, we had a big deadline on Tuesday. And, I've had sometimes when you've got like multiple deadlines, we had one big deadline for the articles. We've got another deadline coming up for some like kind of player blurb stuff. When you have that like multi-pronged deadline situation, it's hard to get back on the horse for the second deadline, isn't it? After Tuesday, I was like, we did it.
This is an experience I can attest to.
Yeah. So today got the message saying, we're thinking this for the dynasty rankings. I was like, yeah, the dynasty rankings. Next Tuesday, another deadline. It might be a late night.
Our part-time blurber in the sense that he's jack of all trades. Ray, who also is kind of the content manager, will message me and be like, so I just want to check and see how this is going. Be like, oh, that's just going great, crushing it. Me opens Word doc and starts the thing he's asking me about all the time, every single time.
Just like schoolwork.
It is 100% like that. And I also am like, I'll get it to you early. I'll have it done. And then like midnight before the deadline, I'm like, here you go, Ray. You're welcome.
Well, there's reports that, Trey Lance, his finger is in the best shape of his life, and with us working on this here draft magazine, mine are needing a rest right now for, doing all that there typing,
Well, be careful, Lawrence, because, Trey Lance suffered that injury in the preseason, and he wasn't right all year. So you do got to take care of your fingers.
Exactly. So, that now we got to get the little rest. You know what I'm saying? I got to be ready for training camp.
Yeah, ice up. Well, we're going to get to ADP surprise in a bit, but first we want to hit some recent fantasy news. We're not going to break down that fantasy news anymore, Kyle. We're going to hit it on your behalf. And let's start in New Orleans, where head coach Dennis Allen said Michael Thomas is, quote, doing well in his rehab, end quote, but is not ready to return to the field. Lawrence, does this set off alarm bells for you? Because it certainly does a little bit for me. Just I already feel worried here. Where are you at with this?
Yeah, I'm a little worried too because it's been so long and we just have not had like a definite answer. Like it has been 2 seasons and counting. So, and we still don't know from that 2 seasons ago what exactly is wrong with Michael Thomas. So for all that time to pass and, them to say, we don't know when he's going to be ready, but it's going well. It's just like, it's kind of what we've been heard. We already heard this already. So it's like, and then when it comes to like actually ranking him, it's that's a hard thing to do as well, because like you want to rank him by what his talent is. But if you don't know what week he's expected to show, or whether it's training camp, week 1, week 6, that's a wide range right there. So it definitely leaves some question marks.
Yeah, it's tough with him, because we're talking about an injury that affected him in the 2020 playoffs, right? Like that's right. Like the timeline of this injury, and then it affects all of last season. But there's questions about is he okay with the team? Is that maybe what's really happening here? But that stuff was kind of put to rest in this offseason. So if he's missing time now, it does have me worried that this is like a health concern, that he's still not 100%, which if he's not 100% now, when will he be?
Yeah. not ready to return to the field 16 months. I think 16 months it's been, Kyle, since we've seen this man play in an NFL game. Are you sharing the same kind of ominous feeling here?
Yeah, I feel incredibly anxious whenever like you see Michael Thomas falling below ADP and you're like, I want to do it. I want to be the guy who gets like Jameis Winston's number one receiver should be a very valuable player. But like
You want to be the type of guy who drafts Michael Thomas, just kind of living
I want
moment
to have
moment.
that bravado, that charisma that's like, I want Jameis Winston's number one receiver. And Michael Thomas, even though he wasn't really used this way during the Drew Brees era, is also great on the deep ball. He's just a phenomenally talented receiver, but your hands get sweaty. The phone starts slipping like a bar of soap in the shower. And you're like, I don't know if I can do this because like, this should not be the timeline of an injury that a player comes back from and dominates from. You just don't see players miss this much time and return to their form, really. So yeah, I very much share the like, seems like we could have reached the end of the line of peak Michael Thomas years ago at this point.
Yeah, he's now 29 years old. Let's head to Dallas, where we'll talk about a receiver on a very different trajectory. That is word that CeeDee Lamb, according to himself, grew half an inch and added 10 pounds of muscle this offseason. Now, clearly earth-shaking stuff, I know, but let's just use this as an excuse to talk about Lamb's outlook. Coming off a year where he put up 79 receptions, 1,102 yards, 6 touchdowns. Our most recent blurb on him called him a, quote, cinch first-round fantasy pick. Kerrane, we'll start with you. I want to get your thoughts here. And also, does this news qualify as a best shape of his life situation?
Of course. I mean, he's literally saying he grew in half an inch. The funny thing to me about this report is that he says he gained 10 pounds. And then the picture associated with it is like the skinniest receiver I've ever seen. So it's like, did you lose 15 pounds and then gain 10 back? This doesn't seem like he really put on a ton of weight this offseason. But I didn't write the cinch first round blurb because I'm actually getting a little bit queasy about his ADP at the moment, which is kind of like in the late first, early second. I get it. I mean, he's a talented receiver. He's going to see a bunch of targets, but he has yet to really deliver on the superstar kind of pedigree that we thought. He had the chance to develop into a superstar, and he has not. His sophomore year, I thought, was a bit of a disappointment. He was not always on the field in 2 wide receiver sets, and Amari Cooper playing over him on the outside. He was playing in the slot at times. It looked like once Cedric Wilson was manning the slot full time, that CeeDee Lamb was actually almost playing a little bit out of position to be on the outside, that maybe he's better in the slot. All of that makes me feel a little bit nervous about selecting him where he's going, especially when there's receivers in the late second and early third that I think really are superstar level talents. A.J. Brown's going there. Tyreek Hill's going there. T. Higgins is going there. There's lots of guys. Debo Samuel falls in that range now. Like, there's lots of guys that I think are like true stars that you can get like 12 picks after him. So I like CeeDee Lamb. And I think very much easier to paint the picture where he has a huge target share this year because of the lack of target competition, Michael Gallup not starting the season fully healthy, etc. But in terms of a pure bet on talent, it does feel slightly rich.
I think I'm a little more bullish on him being a superstar. He's not AJ Brown yet, but like over 2,000 yards by the age of 22 is something that I think maybe like a dozen or so players have ever accomplished. And now, like you said, he has, I don't know what we'll see from Michael Gallup at the beginning of the season. I don't know if really, it's not what we'll see, it's if we'll see him. And then no Amari Cooper, like he's going to be running with like James Washington and Jalen Tolbert or whatever. I am more confident that he can be a superstar. But I think the thing you mentioned that's most important is the price. It already seems to be baked in. I'm fine taking him where he's going, but I can't get excited to see him having some upside relative to his price just because there are superstars that we know are superstars, maybe in lesser situations, right? I think I would take the number one receiver on Dallas versus number one receiver on Philly, but we have more of a certainty of AJ Brown being a stud receiver than we do with CeeDee Lamb. So yeah, I think I'm a little more bullish than you, but it's almost splitting hairs. I'm comfortable taking him at his price, but it's not like in previous years where I'm like, he's a value, got to gobble him up. It seems like the market has sort of figured out that already.
Part of it is a little bit of a tilt for me because if he was going at like, you know, if he was the 212 or like the 302 or something, I would be hammering him. So part of it's like he's not going where I want to just load because I would love to load up on CeeDee Lamb, but he's going in a range of the drafts where you really have to think about it.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't even know why he had to bring up his little, half inch that he grew at age 23. As like, I don't know who he's trying to impress. He's the guy in Dallas
I'm
anyway.
impressed.
Yeah. First off, he didn't grow. Maybe his hair grew half an inch because I know about that life too with the dreads. Maybe the dreads grew a half an inch. The muscle. That's cool too. But none of this should affect where we draft CeeDee Lamb.
Right.
Again, like you said, Pat, there's other guys around that range, maybe around behind that, that I'd rather take at that price, like a Tyreek or a T. Higgins. But on the flip side, like he's the dude now. And I think a lot of people last season had him ready to break out as a top 5 to 7 receiver. And I think that's why it seemed like a disappointment. So the fact that he's been able to get over 2,000 yards his first 2 seasons, like Kyle just mentioned, that is good. But I think what we're looking for now in year 3, when we know he's the guy, we're looking for closer to great right now.
Pat, would you take A.J. Brown straight up over him?
Say this is one of those things where like, no, because I know I can get A.J. Brown sometimes in the 3rd, but like if their ADP were the same, if I was in one draft and the ADP was the same and I know I'm only going to get one, I would take T. Higgins over him.
Did a lot of twist in there, Pat.
It is a lot of spin. This was I'm not.
If I'm only getting one, I want T. Higgins. That's not that
hey,
much
look,
spin.
T. Higgins for life, baby.
All right.
Lawrence, going back to what you said a minute ago about the growth, now I'm thinking about that in the context of what Kerrane said about the weight. Like maybe he lost 15 pounds and gained 10. Maybe the half-inch gain is he cut his hair short and then it just grew back. Maybe that's all we're talking about here.
Exactly, because in that context, then he ain't lying in.
I will say, as someone, I think I'm only like a year and a half or maybe 2 years older than him, and I'm not that tall, in fact. The promise of still being able to grow even a half an inch at roughly my age, I'm going to say my age, I want to believe him. Personally, I would love to think that there's still something left in the can for me. Though,
Kyle, you got to cut your hair and just start quaffing. I think that's your only chance.
All right.
Yeah. All right. The next news item we're going to hit comes out of Indy, where Frank Reich said on Wednesday, quote, "If I was a fantasy owner, I'd consider drafting Nyheim Hines," end quote. Now, Hines, unbeknownst to Frank Reich, was the RB71 and half PPR points per game last season, according to our blurb, after being the RB31 1 year earlier. So, Kyle, is Frank Reich trolling, or is there some validity to this whole Hines bounce back narrative with Matt Ryan now as the Colts quarterback?
I'll just say it's a good thing Frank Reich isn't a fantasy drafter because he wouldn't do well. Although maybe it's a bad thing because I'd love to draft against Frank Reich and he'd love to coach against me. He is not this is not his realm of expertise. We hear coaches say all the time. Like I remember a time where Tavon Austin was a shoe-in. It was probably Jeff Fisher who said this was for 100 catches. And Bruce Arians always talks about his running backs getting 30 carries and 10 catches a game and 100 touchdowns. And Nyheim just isn't that kind of player. And do I think he could maybe bounce back a bit? Sure, but it's not like the Colts were a complete dead zone for running back production, even as pass catchers. They were 13th in running back targets last year. And Carson Wentz, he doesn't throw to running backs a ton, but Miles Sanders was top 20 in back-to-back seasons in terms of top 20 in targets, with mostly Carson Wentz. Jalen Hurts finished out that final season. So it's not like they never would consider throwing to running backs. It's that Hines is a one-dimensional pass catcher. They can throw to Jonathan Taylor, and we've seen the peak of Hines. So he was at a career low target share last year. Sure, maybe that bounces back slightly, but to want him on my fantasy team, no. And I don't think the team would really trend towards throwing to the running backs either. They drafted a receiver and a tight end, and then they trade for Matt Ryan. That is not, you don't do these things when you're like, all right, we've got everything assembled. Now let's have the quarterback we trade for throw to the running backs a bunch. That's something anyone can do, I assume. I'm not an NFL quarterback. So, no, I 71st in fantasy points per game. Maybe he bounces back from that, but that sounds about right.
I'm a little bit more bullish. I mean, I think he makes sense in kind of zero running back type builds, or, if you're doing one early running back and you kind of need someone to help fill in, more for best ball. I mean, where you're just looking for guys who can help fill in some of those weeks as you're kind of waiting for some of your more contingent plays at running back to hit. I think he makes sense. One thing with the Colts and the quarterback change is that they really went away from the pass in some suboptimal ways as the season went on. I think because they just felt so out on Carson Wentz, they weren't passing as much on 1st and 10. They were passing less overall. They kind of became like a shell of what their plan had been to start the season. And I think Matt Ryan will be good enough to where they're probably calling a bit more passing plays and that type of stuff. So if we're getting like more passing plays on 1st and 10, we probably should see some more check downs and stuff. But, you know, a lot of those will go to Jonathan Taylor. Like, it is tough with Nyheim Hines because you're like, is he going to displace a bunch of routes for Jonathan Taylor? He shouldn't. You know, you'd be much better off having Jonathan Taylor out there. And he doesn't have a ton of contingent value. If Jonathan Taylor misses time, they're not going to just turn it over to Hines. So, yeah, I think probably mostly coach speak where they tend to get a bit carried away. But I do like Hines a bit this year.
Yeah, I mean, he said I would draft him. He didn't say what round. He said
Frank Reich is grinding like 28 round best ball.
18th round.
That man said I draft Nyheim Hines. Yeah. He didn't say round, so it could be just a little. So he might be saying, hey, take him with your 16th round after your defense and your kicker take night. He could be saying anything, you know. Also, too, the thing about that is game script could play a lot into, you know, what Nyheim Hines does. And if the Colts are going to be like we expect them to be, that'll be a lot of late game running, especially in that division in which they play in. Not a tough one, with one of the best offensive lines in football. You're going to expect them to be running the ball, running the clock late in games. We have seen Matt Ryan be successful or have 2 successful running backs with him. If you go back to Devontae Freeman, like the jersey that Matt got in the background right there, Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman, you see that. But those 2 backs were closer in talent than, you know, Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. And like y'all said, they're going to throw the ball to Jonathan Taylor too. So it all just depends. Like, I could see Nyheim Hines having a game where, you know, he catch 7 passes for 78 yards and a touchdown. Then everybody go pick him up. And then he don't do nothing because the coach just won 31-10 and they just smash mouth football. So it's not enough. Frank Reich saying that ain't enough to make me be like, oh, yeah, here we go. But hey, he'll give you games here and there, daily fantasy type guy.
Right. I agree with the DFS thing where he's a guy who can go off on any given week. You just don't exactly know what's going to happen. And by the way, Lawrence, you sent me back to the quote, and I reread it just now. He said if I was a fantasy owner, I'd consider drafting Nyheim Hines.
Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah.
He needs. That ain't even no confidence right there.
He's a sprinkle in at the end of drafts best ball kind of guy. You want 2% exposure, maybe 3 because he's.
This might be a negative comment.
Like
I would also consider not.
Like, he low key dissing his own player.
Yeah, he's probably not on my do not draft list, but yeah. Frank Reich says
chalk up Jonathan Taylor for another 2,000 yards.
Done. All right. Now to Washington, where we got our first update on Curtis Samuel in a while. I know everyone is really anxious for that. As he said, quote, I feel good, I feel fast. And this is coming off a totally lost season, played in only 5 games. I believe only had 6 catches due to groin and hamstring injuries. Now, our blurb notes that he seems to be the forgotten man behind Terry McLaurin and first-round draft pick Jahan Dotson. So, Lawrence, I mean, can we muster any case of optimism here? Is there any deep sleeper potential for Samuel in year 2 with Washington?
Well, you know, the last hope that you have with a player like him is that he's actually a good player when he played. Paris Campbell in the same situation, you know, been hurt. They just drafted a 2nd-round receiver in Alec Pierce. So Curtis Samuel kind of in the same boat. You know he could play. It's just, is he going to play? But now that you have that receiver in there in Jahan Dotson, that make it a little more shaky. It's all about training camp and competing and who's going to get that role behind Terry McLaurin. And I think, you know, both guys will get a shot. However, had Curtis Samuel, you know, not had his injury history, who knows if they even drafting Jahan Dotson. Not somebody I'm particularly looking at due to, you know, Carson Wentz being on, what is this, his third team?
3 years.
Third team in 3 years. Terry McLaurin, he's the guy. They feed targets to J.D. McKissick and Antonio Gibson for that matter as well. So it's not something I'm like crazy excited about. I just want to see the dude play games first before I say anything.
Right.
Yeah, I don't remember the time last year where we were jamming Carson Wentz as number 3 receiver. I don't remember him doing it with the number 2 receiver. The number 1 receiver was at least at times spotty. Like, of course, Pittman was good, but like Pittman didn't crush it. The number 2 and 3 certainly didn't crush it. The Colts didn't have a player that wasn't Michael Pittman go over 400 receiving yards last year. I'm not taking anyone other than the number 1 receiver for Carson Wentz. And even then, like, you'll be frustrated at times. So I am certainly not taking probably the number 3. Maybe he gets number 2 on the depth chart.
Yeah, the thing with Samuel that's interesting is that he kind of got pigeonholed by this coaching staff a couple different years when he was in Carolina. Mm-hmm. He was like a pure deep threat in 2019, not particularly good in that role. He had previously been kind of this like pure underneath type of guy. He actually broke out in 2020 with a different coaching staff. He was playing for Matt Rule then. So I don't actually love his fit in Washington in general. Like, he seems like they don't tend to like use him as sort of a complete guy. They tend to either treat him as a gadget guy or like a downfield guy. They've got the downfield stuff covered now with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and De'Ami Brown and Cam Sims. Like, kind of all their receivers are guys that kind of are outside downfield type wide receivers. So my guess is that Samuel's probably playing a lot of slot snaps, getting some like underneath type of stuff. And that doesn't sound very good with Carson Wentz. I think the only thing he really does well is kind of chuck it deep. So I'm not really interested. And it does make me less bullish on Jahan Dotson, although I was already not very bullish on him.
Yeah, you guys legitimately have me fully terrified of this Commanders passing game after that little discussion. One more receiver-related note, and that is that Jim White of Titans.com wrote that he could see another addition at wide receiver. Another addition before the season at receiver, I should say. Obviously, that gets us thinking of some of the available names, including Will Fuller and Odell Beckham, but mostly Kerrane. It gets us thinking about one of your favorite current draft targets, the rookie first-round pick Treylon Burks. Are you even remotely concerned about this hypothetical at this point?
Well, who are they supposed to add? Because they're not adding Julio Jones, right? They just got rid of him. So, I mean, are we talking about Odell Beckham who tore his ACL in the Super Bowl? Or I guess Will Fuller. But that would be kind of a weird choice by Fuller unless there's just no market for his services. So I guess I'm not like Jones would
Cole
be the
Beasley.
guy.
I've seen the name Cole Beasley mentioned.
Oh, no. Well, if they sign Cole Beasley, then Treylon Burks is done. You know, they didn't. They've already given up on the 16th pick when they signed Cole Beasley. Yeah. I'm not that worried because I think Beckham's probably the most realistic guy, and it's like and all this stuff could maybe say more about Robert Woods, and frankly, just the depth. Like, they don't have. It's like Nick Westbrook, Akine, like the wide receivers. They need more wide receivers on this team. It's kind of like Atlanta or like the Bears, where it's like kind of crazy that they haven't brought in someone else already. But yeah, I mean, like, look, if Treylon Burks is going to get out targeted by Robert Woods coming off an ACL tear, or Odell Beckham coming off an ACL tear, he's not very good, right? But like, and that's a possibility that he's not very good. But there are a lot of reasons to think he might be very, very good. So I'm just going to continue betting on that at his current price. Although his price is creeping up a little bit. He's getting into like the 6th round sometimes. So you can't just completely hammer him. But yeah, I'm still going to bet on this highly productive early declare player who was extremely efficient at basically everything he did.
Yeah, I like Will Fuller as a fit for this team because they don't really have, like, A.J. Brown played every role for this team. He can win short, he can win deep, and they don't have that anymore. The thing is, he could win deep really well on these sick play action. The box is crowded to stop Derrick Henry, and you just heave it to A.J. Brown. I think Treylon Burks could be that guy, but he was like, he had like a sub-10 ADOT, was like 345th in ADOT in college. It's because they were trying to get him a ton of touches, but you do think they're probably not going to load him up with the entirety of A.J. Brown's workload, and the best thing he does is get the ball and break tackles. So I don't know if they have that true clear-out guy when Ryan Tannehill goes to bomb one on play action. I'm not sure who that would be. I guess for now, probably is Treylon Burks. It doesn't seem like that's a Robert Woods type of fit. So getting a guy who can do that role, I think, makes sense for the team. It wouldn't really scare me for Treylon Burks. Kind of like Pat said, the reason guys are around at this time of the year is they're probably not that good in the sense of there's not a high demand for their services. They're not number ones coming in. So if Treylon Burks is going to win as a rookie, it won't be Cole Beasley or Treylon Burks impeding his progress. It'll be his own doing.
The ADOT stuff's also a little overblown. 9.7 in 2021, 10.1 in 2020, 16.7 in 2019. Like, he was used deep, but he was used also a lot on screens and basically glorified handoffs, sweeps, and that type of stuff. So he's actually had a higher ADOT than Drake London, for example.
Yeah, he physically profiles very similarly. AJ Brown's a bit more athletic, but size-wise, they could be able to win in the same way. I just think this team was at best when it had a guy who could really just crush like safeties deep, and I don't know if they have that guy. I'd like to see them have that guy. Also, like Will Fuller might just give us 20 snaps again and not play. He's played more than a dozen games once in his career, I think. So nothing is really scaring me off of Burks right now. I think that'd be better for the team overall if you have a guy who can get those fun deep shots from Tannehill.
Like you said, Pat, I feel like the best fit for them, they just got rid of him, and that's Julio Jones. This is nobody. It's nobody that's gonna be, oh man, no, can't draft Treylon Burks right here, right now. His over under is 824.5 yards for the season. AJ Brown touched over 1,000 yards in his rookie season, and we kind of looking for Treylon Burks to, come into that role. I might be hitting the over on that.
Yeah, and that over-under that you mentioned is from our friends at PointsBet. And Kerrane, I just want to quickly circle back to what you said about the Falcons. They did add Geronimo Allison, so I'm not really here to hear
and
you
Brian
saying
Edwards.
they're not adding to that receiving room. Okay, we're not hearing it.
That's fair.
We've got some late May ADP surprises coming out. First, we're going to take a very quick break. And this is just a reminder that if you don't have the NBC Sports Predictor app powered by PointsBet, go and download it now. The contests are free and easy to play, and you have a shot to win thousands by predicting what will happen in the NBA playoffs, Premier League, on the PGA Tour, and NASCAR circuit. All right. You guys have each brought one player to the table. We looked up some ADPs, I believe mostly on Underdog, and these are ADPs that surprised you for whatever reason or stood out to you for whatever reason. So, Lawrence, we'll start with you. Who do you have?
I got Saquon Barkley, man. Going as a third round back, the price for him just get cheaper and cheaper every year. He's battled with injuries the past few years. I guess he got the injury prone label now. Let's just all remember that Dalvin Cook once held such title.
Yeah.
Since then, he's had 3 straight years where he's rushed for at least 1,100 yards and averaged over 42 catches per season in that span. Barkley himself, playing in 13 games due to injuries, he was still able to get over 40 catches. Now, inconsistent play from the quarterback position, inconsistent living from the coaches. They got new ones of those, so that should help. Brian Dable coming in with his system. So I think it's a fairly cheap price to get such a great natural talent who was once the first overall pick in fantasy football. To get him in the third round, you gotta feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I think we talked about it last week on the show in reference to Urban Meyer, in that we want to bet on the Jaguars because they aren't going from like bad coaching. They're going from like multiple standard deviations beyond the mean, below the mean of terrible coaching, and just getting a decent coach would make a difference. I think they got a good coach. And I feel like we have the same argument to be made for this Giants team where like, oh, you're telling me that the brain trust that was Joe Judge, Freddie Kitchens, and Jason Garrett couldn't get the most out of Daniel Jones and a bunch of weapons. No, I'm shocked that those guys couldn't make it work. If there was a coach who I think could make it work, it would be Brian Dable. And then also getting Patrick Mahomes quarterbacks coach, passing games coordinator, Mike Kafka. I think they could have, at least offensively, one of the better minded teams we saw with Josh Allen. They were passing on early downs, passing often throughout. And then also Josh Allen deserves plenty of credit for this, but they did turn Josh Allen around with some help from Allen, improving his accuracy in a way that is almost unheralded. Do I think we get that from Daniel Jones? No, but do I think a massive step forward for the entire offense is, if not like likely, at least in the cards? Absolutely. Just looking at the coaching alone. So I want to bet on this team, at least at their very depressed ADPs, and that very much includes Saquon Barkley.
And Kerrane, before you jump in, I think we should note that an entire wall just fell in someone's home a minute ago, I think. Did you guys hear that, or was that just me?
I heard
That was
that.
that was my dog Murphy, who likes to go.
Okay.
He likes to be under my desk as I
Yeah.
record podcasts. But then sometimes he hears a bird outside, so he's also got to investigate that. So
Hey,
Well, the worst part is we can't like track his listens anyway, right? So we want to get like good listener numbers, right? And dogs don't count as listens as far as like the iTunes algorithm is concerned.
right.
yeah,
No,
it's a
fair.
real flaw of the algorithm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm like a little bit less excited about the Giants, but I do like the prices. Daniel Jones is very, very cheap. You can get all the wide receivers pretty cheap, and Saquon I like at his price as well, because he did have moments last year where he looked like old Saquon Barkley, and his breakaway numbers at times were pretty decent. He did rip off some runs where you're like, oh yeah, he's still got it. He's still able to kind of have that same elusiveness that he's shown previously. His yards per out run were way down last year, but I do think that could be just kind of a nature of the poor coaching, not setting their players up to succeed. I guess I'd push back a little bit that it's like a Jaguars level coaching situation, because like Garrett did do some okay stuff to start the year. Once they fired Garrett and they had Freddie Kitchen, it was pretty much Urban Meyer. But we do have a bigger upgrade, I think. I think, Brian Daboll could be a huge upgrade compared to Doug Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a decently high ceiling for this offense relative to where it came from. I agree on that point.
And just to finish this out, Saquon will play the whole year at age 25. So all things considered, I mean, last year I was I'm sure you guys may be in the same place, pretty terrified of drafting him. I'm finding myself more and more intrigued.
Matt, you did just burn a good guess how old this guy is. Piece of
yes, you
content,
did.
So
Yeah,
you could at least throw it to other Pat when we come back, but that would have been a good one.
I would say there's
Pretty
three
upset.
kind of undervalued workhorses in this range, or potentially undervalued guys. Leonard Fournette, James Conner, and Saquon Barkley all tend to go in a similar range. Where are you guys at on those three? Do you have Barkley as the first guy?
I got Fournette as the first guy out of that trio. Fresh deal. You got Rashad White coming in, but Leonard Fournette has been amazing since joining the Bucs. So much so that they said bye to your boy Rojo. But it's cool. He gonna get his shot. But
We're not worried. We're not sad about that.
But yeah, I would put Fournette first there, and that's tough between Connor and Saquon for me. But I'll go Saquon second.
Yeah, Connor kind of feels like the consensus third maybe on that list. What do you think, Kyle?
Yeah, if we were grouping these three, I feel like Fournette would be a tier above. We just saw him. He was so dominant last year. He does I don't care if he doesn't get 1,500 rushing yards. He does the most fantasy impactful things. He scores a bunch of touchdowns. He's a great goal line back, and he catches incredible amounts of passes. You're getting a mostly Saquon Barkley type of role that we aspire to see Saquon Barkley in. Maybe not entirely, but close enough on an offense that it's probably the best offense, a top 2 offense. Whereas when I talk about my excitement for the Giants improving, it's going from being a dumpster fire team to a team that can have some good weeks, is around the league average, right? That's not what the Bucs are. The Bucs are just a dominant offense. So I still take Fournette pretty much easily ahead of the other two. The other two are closer to me because you still have sort of an offensive edge in Arizona, but less so. And I would be a little more concerned about James Conner injury stuff. So I would say Saquon second, James Conner third, but those two are close. Fournette to me is kind of head and shoulders above the rest.
I think Saquon has a case over Fournette in these tournament structures, because Rashad White, as a rookie, could really be making his impact down the stretch. And you've got, Saquon doesn't really have – Devontae Booker's not there anymore. So Saquon's got the potential to take over, a ton of snaps. And we just saw this offense with this offensive coordinator, now head coach Brian Daboll, give Devin Singletary 100% of the snaps in a playoff game. So we could see them really lean on Saquon Barkley snaps wise.
Could you have imagined a universe a few years ago, where we would have this conversation where we're saying we'll take Leonard Fournette over Saquon Barkley in fantasy drafts? That's wild.
It's crazy.
I don't know. That's scary.
To be fair, Leonard Fournette was a top 5 overall pick.
He
just
was.
paying the dividends, is just paying a little late.
This is true.
That's
This
the
is also true.
Jaguar effect.
The Jaguar top 5 pick isn't like a regular. You gotta put it down a little. He was a first round pick. We'll give him that.
All right, Kerrane, let's go to your ADP surprise that you brought to the table here today.
Yeah, for me, it's Garrett Wilson. I'm getting Garrett Wilson. I got him today in the 9th round of a Best Ball Mania draft. I went in Best Ball Mania draft, which was in retrospect not a good decision. When the puppy's going, the people in Best Ball Mania are like really invested in getting their Best Ball Mania drafts in, and they know what they're doing. So, it wasn't an easy draft for me. Got sniped left and right, but I still got Garrett Wilson outside the top 100 picks. Got him at 102. You're getting Treylon Burks, with a 2.5 round premium to Garrett Wilson. Same with Drake London. You're seeing Sky Moore going in like the 7th round. So I get Garrett Wilson 2 rounds after Sky Moore. I love Sky Moore, but Garrett Wilson is a better prospect than Sky Moore. You're even seeing Chris Olave go ahead of Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson outgained Chris Olave last year when he was a junior, and Chris Olave came back. He had to come back for his senior year to get drafted in the 1st round, which I think, that's really why we care so much about this 4-year thing. It's that Garrett Wilson probably would have been a 2nd round pick last year. He had to come back to school to earn that 1st round capital. And while he was doing it, Garrett Wilson was playing better. To get him after Chris Olave now, I understand it's a Jets player. I understand, Elijah Moore is someone that we're betting on to break out as well. But when you look at the way they're probably going to deploy these guys, once Garrett Wilson's up to speed, he's going to be playing on the outside, I think. They're talking about Elijah Moore like he's their slot receiver, which means we might not see Elijah Moore running a full slate of routes. He might be like a 70% guy. Garrett Wilson, once he's fully up to speed, could be out there all the time. I don't, is that ideal to have Corey Davis playing ahead of Elijah Moore? No, but that's like a very plausible outcome here, where Garrett Wilson in 2 wide receiver sets might be competing with Corey Davis for targets, and I think he can win that battle. So it's not an ideal situation, but the discount that it comes with is pretty juicy, and especially in underdog where all of these wide receivers, these rookie high-end wide receivers, are priced up. I think he has excellent value compared to the rest of the group. On other sites, he's even cheaper.
Yeah, the Olave thing was exciting to me too, and I looked it up. You're like, you see Olave go ahead. His ADP is 1 spot ahead. He goes right in front of him, which is kind of insane, right? We have I think Olave has the chance to be his team's one, but it's solely based on Michael Thomas not playing. Michael Thomas is back. He will crush, assuming he is back and is physically some percentage of Michael Thomas.
He was his team's 3 last year in college.
Yeah, we will see Michael Thomas crushing targets, and then you will have a number 2 on a run first team. Not very valuable. Whereas we have a very real chance to see Garrett Wilson as his team's number 1, as he was over Chris Olave last year. I think that's the perfect dichotomy to draw, is just how these players were used last year and what's more likely that we see which one become the wide receiver 1 as a rookie on their own team. To me, Wilson kind of would be easily my pick to be that guy. And the fact that they go the other way, even if it's just by 1 pick, that was a good comparison draw. And I'm kind of, it fits the show perfectly. In fact, you did your homework great. That surprised me very much.
Wow, well done. Back to the homework theme, Kerrane. You aced the assignment. Lawrence, where are you on this whole Garrett Wilson thing?
Yeah, so for me, with Garrett Wilson and these Jets wide receivers, Pat, you were talking about the discount, and you actually mentioned why there is a discount. It's because he plays for the Jets. I simply don't know which of these receivers to draft. I know it's just not going to be Corey Davis. I have no clue who to draft out of Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson. I know Garrett Wilson is cheaper. Elijah Moore, man, he hit the ground running last year, and I'm talking about with Mike White. The great white hype. He hit the ground running with him, man. So, Chris Olave, if you're going to compare them, talking about him talent-wise, I'm going to go with you there. But based on their situations, like the Jets, man, they got to show me something, because you got Breece Hall there too now. You got Breece Hall, and that's going to obviously be the guy who take a lion's share of the touches simply because he's a running back. But I'm Just I'm definitely down to take one of these Jets receivers. I just don't know which one.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty sharp point, and kind of reminds me of the 49ers last year a little bit, where it's like, how is this going to work? How are these guys going to hit? And they didn't hit together, but Deebo Samuel smashed. So, maybe Elijah Moore's the Samuel here, and I'm pumping the Brandon Ayuk bags. But I think, you want both guys. Maybe you don't want them together as much as you might want some other teams, because it is pretty difficult to imagine Zach Wilson supporting two really high-end fantasy weapons. I think we can get a little creative and a little imaginative this time of year, but that's a little much. But maybe if you've got Breece Hall, you tack on an Elijah Moore or a Garrett Wilson, because you're betting on the offense, and we could see Hall and one of the wide receivers hit together. So I think a little bit like Denver last year, where you're kind of like, one of these guys going to be good, but I don't know which one. Maybe just go with one guy, or San Francisco last year. That's kind of where I'm at with him. I do like Elijah Moore somewhat. I think he's maybe a little bit overpriced, but I still draft him. But Garrett Wilson, I think,
So
you're getting
you picked your guy. Like, people will either
pick your guy.
People will pick Sutton or Judy, because you gotta pick one guy. Or definitely last year you had to pick one guy.
Yeah.
You got a little more leverage now with Russell Wilson, but yeah, I get you.
But you don't have to like go all in on one guy this year. It's just, I think in that draft, you're like, well, it's going to be more, for this draft. And you can mix it up between drafts.
Got to go back to the phrase you just said a minute ago. I hate that it's become a thing. I hope I'm not holding the Brandon Ayuk here. I'm just like, so crushing that that's now how we talk about Ayuk after our high hopes last year.
Well, he's going in kind of the same range. So, there's hope. Maybe hope rebound.
Yeah, that's definitely a conversation for another day. But I am curious. I am curious to pick you guys' brains about some of last year's disappointments. But Kyle, let's go to the receiver that you brought to the table here, and it is, I believe, a receiver. Who do you have?
Rashod Bateman going at 60, almost on the dot in underdog drafts. Like, that's a number it's going to rise. Like, I know the types of players we talk about on these shows that other people talk about. The super productive in college, second-year receiver with just a runway wide open at targets is a guy that rises throughout the summer like automatic. And I can tell you, if you want closing line value in terms of, if you were to think of it betting on a player's ADP, he is a player you'll get closing line value on. And it makes sense. As I said, he has 18 breakout age, 80th percentile dominator rating in college. This was at a Power 5 school, and he can play both inside and outside. They mixed him up a bit last year, and as a sophomore in college, he led the nation in yards per route run while playing on the outside. Like, he has a lot of the trappings, the size, the yards per route run, the athleticism of a true number one receiver. The only way you can knock him is say it's a run-first offense, and that is fair, but it's a run-first offense where if he's not the number one receiver, is it like Devin Duvernay, Tylan Wallace? I don't know. And I'm going to bet on the guy every single time who just has a sterling college profile. And last year, sure, like I think he put up like just 500 yards or something. He also missed the entire offseason, the beginning of the start of the season, because of a core muscle surgery. And he didn't get up to a full-time role until it was week 15. It's the first time, I think it was week 15, he crossed a 70% snap share. They weren't using him like you would get to use a player who was there in the offseason because he wasn't there. So I'm willing to bet on the awesome profile and the perfect landing spot in terms of available targets pretty much every time. And I know drafters will as the summer goes on.
I mean, yeah, we saw Bateman, and he did still have some flashes, Kyle, even despite all that. He had a 7-catch, 103-yard game. He had a 6-catch, 80-yard game. I think he had a 10-target game late in the season with 7 catches. So he still had his moments. Kerrane or Lawrence, either of you guys have Rashod Bateman-related thoughts?
I love Bateman, but, I do think the pushback is that this is a Mark Andrews team. That they're just going to funnel targets through Mark Andrews, and we know that Lamar Jackson loves throwing to Mark Andrews. Huntley loved throwing to Mark Andrews. And Bateman did not play particularly well last year, didn't have targets that well. So you could see targets really flow through Mark Andrews. So the Ravens, after kind of doing some weird stuff where he wasn't running all the routes to begin his career, he's splitting time with Hayden Hurst, like, they get it. They get what they have in Mark Andrews now. And so you're potentially not really seeing like a true number one target share from the quote wide receiver one here, because Mark Andrews is almost the wide receiver one. So I do think that Bateman's a secondary option, right? Like, Mark Andrews will lead this team in targets. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I would. It sounds like I think it's closer than you would, just based on the fact that like you can't give everything to Mark Andrews, right? There's only so much target share you could push his way, and then when you're looking at the rest of the pie, if you're just doing the projections, like where are you giving it to? Are you probably not giving it to the running backs? They don't throw the running backs that much. Hopefully you're not giving. I don't know. Maybe you're giving it to Tylan Wallace or something. So yeah, I still think I would say Mark Andrews leads the team in targets, but that still leaves so much on the table. And I'm not sure I see a player talented enough that isn't Rashod Bateman to take a chunk of that, really.
Yeah, Kyle. When you came out with this pick, I was actually like, damn, I should have thought of this myself because I'd been drafting him. In fact, he's my wide receiver 15 in redraft this season. That's how much I'm rolling with Rashad Bateman. Lamar Jackson does love targeting Mark Andrews. That is his guy. Last season, though, Mark Andrews was averaging a healthy over 8.5 targets per game with Lamar. That number rose to 11 with Tyler Huntley. Now, Marquise Brown, on the other hand, who's now gone, he leaves 146 targets on the board. And so that's going to be, Rashad Bateman, who is, shout out to Hollywood Brown. Love him too, but Rashad Bateman is the better player. And like you said, Kyle, a true alpha number one receiver. And it may be a run first offense, but let's not forget this Ravens offense produced 2 1,000-yard pass catchers in Mark Andrews and Hollywood Brown. Mm-hmm. So it's there. It can be had. So all the reason his ADP is where it is because the thought process is, run first. Well, people aren't thinking about how they had 2 1,000-yard receivers at the same time. So if Hollywood Brown could produce those numbers, that's very much in the realm of possibility to do for Rashad Bateman. And I'm getting this dude in every draft.
Yeah, and I'd even push back a little bit on it just being a pure Mark Andrews offense. We actually saw Marquise Brown have a higher target share by, I think, less than 1%, right? They're in the same ballpark, but they were basically dead even on targets. Mark Andrews edged him out by like 7 or something like that because he played one more game, right? So they were, the twin wide receiver ones, right? Every other week, it's one of them. Mark Andrews is much more efficient. He was incredible last year. And I don't think Rashad Bateman fits the same type of role that Marquise Brown plays. So I'm not saying that I think that Bateman leads the team in targets, right? But I think based on what we saw last year, it could be closer than we expect from the split we saw. Yeah,
he certainly has a chance to lead the team in targets. To your point, Brown probably would have. And Brown also wasn't that efficient last year. It 1.61 yards per out run. So the bar is maybe not that high for what Bateman has to do. Just because, to your point on the other receivers, I mean, it's James Prochet. Who's like a pure slot receiver who wasn't very good. Devin Duvernay, who they still kind of haven't figured out who he is. He might be a slot receiver too. Tylan Wallace, who was terrible last year. I mean, he didn't really get on the field in his limited sample, so that's a little unfair. But he was terrible from a yards per hour perspective, kind of like Terrace Marshall level. So who else is going to earn targets if not Bateman at the wide receiver position? I do enjoy drafting Bateman.
And again, the number Lawrence said, 146 targets. That's a big number, and you just listed the names, none of whom are going to be stepping into that void. So,
which is crazy because Marquise Brown, he want more targets, and then when it was shown to him that, you had 146, then he was like, it's the type of targets, but 109 of those targets he was wide open. So
I was going to say, it's
bouncing off his hands. I mean, what else do you want?
Stop throwing me these deep balls. There's too much pressure.
You want him to run up to you and give you the ball? What you want him to do?
More shovel passes. More shovel passes.
He wants the Debo role. He should have just switched with Debo. Debo's like, I don't want to play running back, and then Marquise Brown's like, all these deep targets, I keep dropping them.
All right, that's the end of our list, guys. Anything anyone wants to mention on NBC Sports Edge? Any work coming up or any work that you've just published? What do you got?
I have USFL content coming up in 24 hours, probably up by the time you hear the show. If not, it's close enough. And both Lawrence and I will be on Battle of the Bets. You can just find that on the NBC Sports Edge betting Twitter account. And I think Lawrence, you beat me last week. So congrats on that one. I sound cordial right now. I'll try and come with the smack
No,
talk. They say you need to.
I don't think you think. I think you know.
There we go.
I was literally getting
There we
into like on here, I'm cordial. I won't smack talk. Even on the other show, I feel uncomfortable doing it. And of course, Lawrence is like, no, you're catching hands anywhere I go.
All these hands, all these virtual hands.
I'm working on the dynasty ranks, and the draft guide, working on the draft guide this week.
Same as these fellas. Draft guide, content, articles. Be on the lookout, man. That's about it.
All right. That's going to do it for us on this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you listen. Take a minute to rate and review us as well. I want to say thanks to everyone for listening and watching live. Kerrane, Lawrence, Kyle, thanks, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for all the latest fantasy and sports betting advice from NBC Sports Edge. And don't forget to sign up for NBC Sports Edge Plus to get the best-in-class draft guides, as well as season-long fantasy, DFS, and sports betting tools that will give you the edge.